What's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? It's a pretty intense question, especially coming from a stranger we've only just met. But imagine for a moment that it was just you and me in this room right now. Would you tell me your story? And if you did, would you then trust me to share that story with the world? As a journalist, that's what I do. I help tell people stories. But in a world of shrinking attention spans and social media sound bites, sometimes I have just 30 seconds to make an audience care, which is approximately the amount of time I've been speaking for so far. Imagine that. In the time it took for me to say just that, I'd have had to have summed up one of the most important moments of your life. In such a short amount of time, what would I leave in and what might I cut out? What would I get right? And what might I get slightly less right? Would I be able to include all of your emotions, the context and complexities of your story? Of course, if your story even gets told at all, often depends on one thing. If a journalist considers it newsworthy. Now, unless you're a celebrity, navigating what makes you newsworthy might be a bit of a tricky thing to do, and I know this from personal experience. I wasn't always on this side of the table. In fact, the first time my name was in the national media, it wasn't even on the byline. Instead, Sophia Alexandra Hall were the second, third, and fourth words of an article about my education journey. The story of how I got to university. But Sophia, hundreds of thousands of people in the UK go to university every year. Well, what made me newsworthy wasn't necessarily what I had done, but rather who I was. I was 16 when I entered the UK's foster care system. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever been through. The confusion, the despair, the inner turmoil I felt is still impossible to describe to this very day. But in that peace that still clings to the first page of my Google search results, the worst thing that ever happened to me is summed up in just 25 words. But that's the reality of journalism. Limited word counts, multiple interviewees, and tight, timely deadlines. In reality, I was lucky to get 25 words dedicated to just that. The journalist on the byline did a good job. In the piece, I am portrayed as a care leaver who beat the odds, who beat the stereotypes. But the only reason my life was newsworthy was because of the worst thing that ever happened to me. Since that piece, I've been interviewed many more times, usually about my life as a care experienced person. And in each interview, I give part of my story, never the full one, because I know that no one piece, no one article can sum up who I truly am. So why, when we read the news, do we assume we're getting the full story? When you tell a journalist your story, you're telling it in the first person. These are things, experiences that happen to you. But when a journalist tells your story for you, they're telling it in the third person. It's their lens that shapes your narratives. They decide what to leave in and what to take out and what to condense. Not usually because of malice, but simply because of time and space. And as articles get shorter and TV packages get turned into 30-second social media reels, we're having to choose our words, narratives, and which stories we actually tell more carefully than ever. Unfortunately, this can lead to an oversimplification of interviewees. And as a journalist with a lived experience background, I've noticed that some stories from underreported on communities only get told if they fit into one of three narrative boxes. I've defined these boxes as the following. Number one, the tragic victim. Let down by governmental systems, surrounded by headlines filled with doom and gloom statistics they're unlikely to beat. Number 2, the dangerous threat, the othering of a community, one person's story becoming a representation of an entire group of people. And number 3, the inspirational exception. They did it. They beat the odds. They beat the stereotypes that this piece is reinforcing by reiterating said stereotype. This is a box I've often been put into without my consent. Humans are messy. We're complex. We don't fit neatly into little labeled boxes, no matter the context. Not only can these boxes be inaccurate and unfair, they can also be incredibly harmful for the communities these stories are about. Take last summer, the UK 2024 anti-immigration riots. Asylum seekers were thrust into the media spotlight. Hundreds of thousands of articles were written about this community, hours upon hours of rolling news footage. So you should be able to answer a few simple questions about this community, right? With all that news, like, how long does the average asylum decision take? What's the weekly allowance of an asylum seeker? Are they allowed to work while waiting for a decision? And if you can't answer these few simple questions, you have to think, is the news still the news if you don't learn anything from it? Was that reporting designed to inform or inflame? The illusory truth effect is a cognitive bias that suggests the more times you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it's true. So if you keep reading headlines that suggest that asylum seekers are dangerous threats or foster kids are tragic victims, these may start to become accepted beliefs. Of course, propagandists have known this years before the illusory truth effect was coined in 1977. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels is attributed with having said, if you repeat a lie enough, it becomes true. One of the main reasons I became a journalist is because I didn't see my community, care experienced people, fairly represented in the media. I saw what I thought were newsworthy stories seemingly left on the cutting room floor again and again while our community was reduced to stereotypes in the media. For as long as journalism has been a thing, it seems that journalists have been the ones deciding what stories are newsworthy. But technology has changed the speed of our profession. We can get breaking news to you in seconds, but for the first time ever, you can respond just as fast. In my first newsroom, we had this giant screen ranking our most read articles of the day. Clicks were our currency, and we assumed these numbers told us what our audience thought was newsworthy. Now, as deputy digital editor in a different newsroom, we do things differently. We challenge those numbers. One click alone doesn't make a newsworthy story. But changing what newsworthy means doesn't just fall on me. And it doesn't even just fall on my fellow journalists. It also falls on you, our audience. Journalists don't know everything, despite what teenage Sophia might have thought. Usually when we write a piece, there is someone out there, someone who knows something more than us, and sometimes that someone is you. So it's incredibly important what you decide to like, comment, and engage with. So how can you change this historic media landscape? Well, I'm going to give you 4 actionable tips that you can take away and start doing today. Number 1, call in, not out. When we see a piece online that misses the mark, it can be something you want to write an angry comment under, tell the world why they got this wrong. Instead of doing that and maybe feeding into the giant ranking machine, why not instead come to us directly? Send a letter to the editor. Tell us what we missed. Did we even understand what makes this piece newsworthy to begin with? Number 2, be intentional with what you share. When a piece makes you angry, with one click you can repost it to your followers. With one click you can share it with a friend. The next time you see something that makes you angry, I want you to pause. I want you to ask yourself this question. Why is this news? Was this designed to inform or inflame? Sometimes the loudest message you can send is no click at all. Number 3, support slower, better journalism. Some of the best stories take time to tell. Invest in depth over drama. Look for long-form reads. Look for documentaries. Look for investigative podcasts. And number 4, follow people with lived experience online. Some of the best stories are already out there and they don't need a journalist to tell them. Find those voices directly. Uplift those voices directly, whether or not the mainstream media considers their lives newsworthy. At the start of this talk, I asked, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? I asked because I wanted you to feel that raw emotion that it takes to share a personal story with a journalist, with a stranger, who then shares it with the world. So the next time you read or watch an interview, I want you to ask yourself, why is this news? What makes it newsworthy? Is it the story? Is it the person? Or is it the narrative box they've been placed into? How would I feel if this story were about me? Because maybe the real question isn't what makes you newsworthy, but rather what makes the news worthy of you. Thank you so much. Thank you.